Now, chances are, if you are interested in learning a foreign language, you don't want to invest 4, 5, 6 years into learning an easy language that really should only take 1 to 2 max. And that is what the purpose of this video is for. I'm going to teach you the actual way to learn a foreign language fast, not the kind of clickbait, horseshit, learn a language in 24 hours way. Obviously, that isn't true. I'm just going to teach you the principles of efficient learning so you can learn as fast as possible and actually achieve a goal as fast as possible. And yes, I put a pretty interesting picture at the top of this one. I put a tricycle and a Ferrari, but I'm going to explain how these are actually important later on. So just keep that in mind. Let's go. So the online community is kind of split between two factions. There's like when I say online language learning community, I mean like YouTubers, anyone who really talks about language learning. They're kind of split between, people that make content on, look at all these cheats and hacks, and look at how many people I can speak to. I speak 15 languages, and not really actual, either it's them showing off or them lying. Like, it's nothing really particularly useful for people who want to learn a language. And then there's the people that say, language learning is painful and that it'll take 5 years and you'll never be good. And yeah, and then there's like a language simp in his own kind of category. But none of those three categories are particularly useful, I find, for actually making progress in a language, because the truth is anyone can learn a language and it doesn't have to take an exceedingly long amount of time. It is doable in a matter of 1 to 2 years for an exceptionally difficult language, potentially 2 to 3 years. And if you're prepared to knuckle down, or it's a similar language to your native language, it's potentially doable in 10, 11 months, maybe even just under a year. So how do we actually do this stuff whilst still making it fun and basically cutting months and even years off the amount of time it takes? Well, this is doable. So definitely hit the subscribe button, guys. I've got a bonus at the end, and let's go. So this is effectively the language learning process, which we've talked about before. I just want to make sure we are on the same page as far as how learning a language goes. So here's you basically encounter unknown words and grammar. That's the foreign language. You learn them, you acquire more and more over time, and eventually you can be considered fluent in the language or proficient, anything like that. That's the language learning process, overly simplified. But how do we actually learn faster? Well, at each of these points that I've circled, there is actually a way to do all of these things faster. There's a way to upgrade yourself so that you can learn a language faster. There's a way to encounter more unknown words and grammar. There's a way to learn them faster. There's a way to acquire stuff faster. And when you do all of these things together, what actually happens is you accelerate the language learning process so much that you're able to shave months of learning. And there's nothing clickbait or silly in this video that's never been tried. These are all actionable, practical steps backed by science that I myself have done. So the 4 areas to improve speed that we've just focused are and that's your concentration and stuff. Each of these I will talk about on their own slide. There's the encountering unknown stuff. There's the learning and memorizing unknown stuff. And the 4th thing is acquiring more and more over time, which is also progressive overload. And I'll talk about all of them. But effectively, our goal is to learn a language faster. So let's go into all these things from the lens of trying to learn quicker. So, number 1, here is where the Ferrari tricycle analogy comes in. So what I need you to understand is you are the vehicle to progress. A lot of people have a really kind of wrong idea of progress, where they think, I'm just going to stumble upon the language I'm learning. I'm just going to do a bit here and there, and success is either going to fall upon me or I'm just not going to make any progress at all. And that's such a bad way of looking at things. It's such a fixed mindset. So what I want you to understand is that if you do not put effort in, you will get nowhere. If you don't believe in yourself, you will get nowhere. It's kind of like the reason I have the Ferrari tricycle metaphor is because I've heard people say this before. It doesn't matter how hard you pedal on a tricycle. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You're going to get absolutely smoked by a Ferrari. Same goes with the paddling in a boat with a really short oar versus a boat with a speedboat, for example. It doesn't matter how hard you're trying. If you're in the wrong vehicle, you're going to get smoked by no matter what. So what I want you to do is to understand that if you believe in crap that isn't true, if you have poor focus, if you're not organized or driven, and a bunch of other things, you're in a tricycle right now. And that's why, even though you're trying hard, even though you're feeling the pain of, discipline, putting effort into language learn, even when you don't feel like it, you won't actually make that much progress. And that's because you got really sore calves from pedaling in a tricycle. So what do we need to do? We need to actually upgrade to the Ferrari. And the best way to do this is to understand a few basic principles. So if we want to learn faster, I need you to understand these few things. The first thing you need to understand is growth mindset. And I don't just want you to hear what I'm saying. I need you to actually agree with me, or you're not going to get further. It can be done. If you've never taught yourself a language before, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I'm never going to do this. I can't make any progress. It's too difficult. I need to give up. There's some secret way that I don't know about, and you feel frustrated and anxious, etc. That is all because of a fixed mindset where you don't appreciate the fact that to do something very difficult and rare, like teach yourself a language, means you need to invest time, and it's going to be difficult. And what you need to understand is that results in the thing you're after are the product of the effort you put in. So when you want to make progress in a language, don't disconnect yourself from progress. Don't disconnect yourself from you putting effort in. That is the only way you can actually make progress in anything, is to understand that you are the vehicle and you need to invest effort to get further. So when you are learning a language, understand that if you're not going to do stuff, which we'll talk about what the stuff is later on, you will not make progress in the language. The second thing you need to understand is focus. The better your focus is, the more knowledge you will retain. So for example, if I show you a bunch of words and you do some flashcards or whatever, the better your focus is, the easier it will be to learn those words. The worse your focus is, the harder it will be. That's pretty straightforward, right? You probably agree with me on that. But here is where you're probably wrong right now. Imagine I had a magic pill, for example, and I could give it to you, and it would basically double your focus, for example. It's like a magical, shiny, golden pill. You take it. You believe me, right? Like it's not like a scam or anything. You know for a fact this will work. How much do you reckon it would sell for if I could give out a pill that would double people's focus? Like if you take that pill, your brain's going to work twice as fast. You're going to be able to learn new things. You're going to make more money. You're going to have a more fulfilling life. How much would people pay for that? 5,000? 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. I don't know. It would probably a lot of money. It's going to double your focus. What if I told you that pill already exists and it's not $10,000, it's not $5,000. It's actually free. The only price you have to pay is to cut out a lot of the crap things that destroy your focus. So we live in a world with social media right now where you're constantly being bombarded with YouTube shorts, with high dopamine content, all that kind of stuff. And all of that stuff is literally destroying your focus. Your diet where you have cereal in the morning is destroying your focus. So I'd highly recommend you check out my video on boosting your focus. I'll have it linked in the description. But just understand that when your focus is as poor as it definitely is now, you aren't going to make progress. And just the way to improve your focus is so simple. This is my phone, right? The lock screen of my phone is black and white right now because I've turned off color filters, simply because that is lower dopamine, and I've noticed it does improve my focus. So we won't go into it now, but understand that most young people that are in, 15 to 25 have terrible focus because of social media and a bunch of other things. And that makes it so difficult to learn. The third thing I want you to understand is organization. So we'll discuss this more later when we do talk about stuff. But if you don't have a routine, don't have a schedule, don't have a habit tracker with things you're doing every day in the language, you're not going to make progress. That's all a requirement. Organization is basically how you plan to achieve your goals. If you don't have a way of achieving your goal, you're basically at point A, your goal's at point B, and there's no road in between them. Once you're organized, you have a roadmap to get there. And we know for a fact that consistency is absolutely important. If you're not consistent, you're not going to learn things. And the fourth part of this first principle, so this is going to be a bit of a bigger video, is that you need to be driven. And what I mean by driven is actually motivated. If you put someone in a tricycle, right, and you put at the end of the racetrack, there's a 5-cent piece or a penny or whatever like a small amount of money in your currency is, they're not going to really be motivated to go there if that's the prize. If you put 100 grand at the end of the race, or if you live in Vietnam, 100,000 dong is not that much money. But if you put like a large amount of money at the end of the race, like thousands or millions of Australian dollars, they're going to be a lot more motivated. They're going to study how to pedal hard in a tricycle. They're going to put a jet engine on the tricycle. Like, they're going to actually try hard. And what you need to understand is that if you aren't a driven scholar, if you're not going to be a driven person, it's very difficult to actually make significant progress because you have no reason to try. So you do need motivation when it comes to language learning. And that's why if you try and go into language learning without an actual reason to do it, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So what I'd highly recommend is you grab a pen and paper if you haven't done this before and just try journaling. Literally grab like a notebook and a pen and just try journaling about your reasons for why you want to learn the language. This is my notebook for learning Russian. I don't know if you can see that. But you can literally write the language in the middle of the page and then do a bit of a mind map and draw things around it. It could be to travel, for your family, ego, I don't care. It could be kind of reason imaginable. But it's good to have something on paper as for why you're learning. And the last thing I want you to understand is the difference between long-term and short-term motivation. Your long-term motivation is what you want to achieve long-term. So, for example, to learn a language because of any of the reasons you've just written down. And your short-term motivation is what you emotionally feel like doing right now. They won't always be the same. So if you follow your short-term motivation all the time, sometimes you won't feel like learning a language. And what that means is that there's an asymmetry between your short-term and long-term motivation. So if you're only doing things that you feel like doing, occasionally you'll just skip language learning stuff because you won't feel like doing it, which is going to delay your progress, which means you won't make as much progress. And that also means you need to show discipline. So I will link a ton of videos in the description after this for you to go on to, because this is quite a complex video. But that is the first principle I want you to understand. You are the vehicle to progress, and you can learn faster if you do all of these things. If you're more driven, if you're disciplined, if you're organized, if you can improve your focus, if you have a growth mindset, etc. So let's get on and talk about the other things. The next thing we need to understand is encountering unknown stuff. So if we go back to this diagram really quick, these are the 4 areas, right, we need to improve in. So we've already talked about how to improve yourself as far as you are in the vehicle to making progress. Now we're talking about encountering unknown words and grammar. So what I mean by encountering unknown words and grammar is just like encountering words you don't understand. So obviously, when it comes to learning a language, before you start, you don't know any of the words or any of the rules in the language because you just don't know the language. So what you need to understand is that the more words you can encounter that you don't know, the more opportunities there are to actually learn stuff in the language. Otherwise, if you never encounter a word you don't know in the language, you're never going to learn the language. And an important thing to understand here is a lot of people have a really, myself included, actually, I've noticed this a little bit recently in myself. I've been doing this a bit, but I've managed to kind of get a hold of it, is changing your mindset when it comes to not understanding stuff. So a lot of people, when they read in a foreign language, as an example, it could be listening or anything, but I'll just give an example. With reading, when they read in a foreign language, right, and they don't know a lot of the words that they're reading, they get really frustrated and really kind of stressed. And it's like, oh, I don't know this stuff. It's so annoying. I wish I was better. I've put so much effort in and I don't understand what's going on. And it's so stupid because you haven't done that much in the language in the grand scheme of things. So what if you've been learning for 4 months? You've been doing a few hours a week, probably max, for 4 months. You've been speaking English for decades of your life, every single day, hours every day, and you expect to be good at the foreign language. Like, no. So what I need you to understand is this visualization, which I call the uncut gems visualization. Basically, every time you encounter a word you don't understand, it's kind of like picking a miner. Like, imagine a miner who's going out mining for gems, mining for oil, picking up like a piece of rock out of the ground that's been mined, and it's got little gems in it, but it's like, it's uncut, it's dirty. The gems aren't like nice and polished diamonds. They're like, it's like a bit of glitter in a rock. And I want you to imagine the miner going, oh, I wish I pulled out, why can't I pull out a full diamond that's polished out of the ground? Oh, this is terrible. And he throws the uncut gem away. That's kind of like you when you get frustrated trying to learn a foreign language, but you're encountering words you don't know. That's literally what you're doing. You're picking out uncut gems out of the ground and throwing them away because you're not being delivered polished diamonds. Every time you encounter a word you don't understand, that is an uncut gem. That's an opportunity for you to basically grind out the dirt, refine the gem until you have a polished diamond. And if you actually understand this, what you will do is every time you encounter an unknown word, you will take that as an opportunity to basically boost your XP, your experience points in a language, and improve your ability. And if you continue to do that, you'll have a pile of polished diamonds. But on the road you're on at the moment, where you get frustrated every time you encounter words you don't understand, you're just throwing these uncut gems away because they're not being delivered to you on a plate. Like, once you realize this, it's so mind-blowing because it completely changes your perspective on language learning. But let's move on. So if you're not encountering enough words you don't know, you're obviously not going to make solid progress in the language, simply because you need to be encountering things you don't understand. So my advice to you to increase your speed at learning is to take words from content you're consuming. And we'll explain the actual logic behind memorizing stuff on the next slide when we talk about learning stuff. But as far as encountering, when I say encountering, I literally just mean like seeing and reading and hearing words you don't know. Don't overthink that. What you should do is take words from content you're consuming. So it could be books, it could be vlogs with subtitles you're watching, it could be music, it could be podcasts, could be movies, TV, practice reading text, ebooks, audiobooks, literally anything you could read, listen to, or watch in a foreign language. And what I want you to do is take words from them you don't understand, learn them and memorize them, and then reconsume those words. So I'll have a video linked in the description to the input repetition method, which is kind of like the technical way of doing this. It's my way of learning words, and it's super effective. But basically what you will be doing is you'll be reading something, for example, could be listening or whatever, but you'll be reading a practice paragraph or whatever. You'll read it once, you'll reread it, make a list of 10 words you don't know, learn them, like find the Google translation, put them into flashcards, and then reconsume the text, and you will find you actually understand way more what's going on. We'll talk about that a bit more on the memorizing side, but you just need to understand that if you're not encountering unknown words and actually trying to learn them, you're not going to make any progress. So a few more tips on this before we do move on to number 3. Consume at CI level content, so comprehensive input level content. That basically means content that is not so difficult you can't understand it, but not so easy you understand everything. So ideally, somewhere in between, you can understand what's going on, but you don't get every single word. That way, it's not super frustrating, and it actually helps you learn the words because you have an idea of what's going on. And ideally, you also enjoy the text, because if you're reading something that you don't enjoy or listening to something that you don't enjoy, it can get pretty boring. So try finding things that are not too difficult, but also readable or listenable in the foreign language. So you could, if you're at a more advanced level, you can read Harry Potter. That's what I'm reading right now in Russian. Or you could just stick to practice paragraphs about things that are kind of interesting, or vlogs for beginners. You're a little bit more stuck when you're new in the language, simply because there isn't as many resources available, but just do your best. And don't take every single word from a text. If you're reading a chapter, you don't have to take every single word you don't know. Just keep it to like 10, 20, maybe 30, something like that. And try and set targets as well. So if you're you could set like a short-term weekly goal to do maybe this chapter's worth of flashcards, and just grind that over the whole week. And the final things I will say are have patience as well. We already talked about that with the uncut gems visualization, but just understand reading a word 10 times gives you no right to lock that into your long-term memory. Your brain is designed to only remember important things, as we'll discuss in depth in a second. And the only way to actually remember things is to continually expose yourself to them. And also, don't be afraid to study the content. So something that I was doing, that's why I've written my story, something I've been doing a bit recently, which I've stopped and got a hold of, is I set myself a really stupid goal of trying to rush through Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. This is the Chamber of Secrets. I've got the Philosopher's Stone behind me, so I can't hold it up. But I tried rushing through it. Like, I tried to set myself a goal, like read it in a month, or however many weeks it was. I can't even remember. And it was so stupid, because why set myself a fast goal when I can do it slower and enjoy myself and actually study each chapter and reread each chapter, because I enjoy the book and actually learn more words. Not only is it more fun, not only is it less stressful, but I learn more, and I'm a better speaker and I'm a better teacher because of it, because I know more stuff. And that's what I've decided to do. So I do think you need to don't try and rush through content and never reread it again, because you're on this journey not to rush through stuff as an ego attempt and not understand it, but to actually learn stuff. So that's what I want you to understand. The third thing you need to understand if you want to learn a language faster comes with the learning and the memorizing stuff. So most people, let me get a drink of water. Most people, what they do when it comes to language learning is they understand stuff, as in they like learn the translation of a word. So say, for example, you see the word tigre, la tigre in Italian. La tigre means the tiger, and you don't know what it means. That's probably a bad example because it's pretty obvious what it means, but let's just say you don't know what that means. Most people, when learning, would translate that word. They'd see it means tiger, and then they'd maybe do a little bit, but a lot of them would just never even look at it again. And then they kind of expect to remember it. And what that actually breeds is frustration, because, of course, you're probably not going to remember a lot of words if that's your system for memorizing stuff. So the way memorization of foreign words works is that you're locking them into your long-term memory. So when you're speaking English or whatever your native language is, all of those words that you know are locked into your long-term memory because you use them so consistently, and because your brain understands that these words are incredibly important. So what you need to do basically when you're learning a foreign language is to figure out ways to teach your brain that unknown words, unknown anything in the foreign language is extremely important. And that's how your brain remembers things that you've never encountered before effectively. So how do we actually teach our brain that new information is important? Well, there's basically 3 ways of doing it. There's traumatized. This is kind of silly to say. There's trauma, there's similarity, and there's repetition. Obviously, two of those are unrealistic. Repetition is the main ones, but we're not going to go into that because I've talked about that in other videos. So I'm basically going to give you a few tips on how to actually speed up memorizing stuff. And just, I've written evolutionary survival. That's the reason your brain only remembers important things, so that it can focus on the important things for survival. And it basically prunes everything else to basically ensure your survival. So that's how your brain works. The first thing I will say you need to do if you want to learn things faster is diverse repetition. Not just repetition, but diverse repetition. So what I mean by repetition is basically, to actually learn things, obviously you need to consistently expose yourself to them. A lot of people, when they hear repetition, think flashcards or writing things out over and over. Those things, they are repetition. But the best way to learn is actually repetition through a bunch of different ways. So as we talked about on the previous slide, where you can get a bunch of words from a text, do flashcards for them, and then reconsume the text. That's an example of diverse repetition, because you're reading the words, you're encountering them in one text, then you're memorizing them, and then you're continually reconsuming the text, so that your brain is understanding, okay, I'm learning these things, and now I'm actually using them consistently in different ways. Now I understand that they're important. So, for example, if you were to read a Wikipedia page on some, government related thing, then you were to learn all the words, and then you were to watch a video on the composition of the government, for example, as a random topic. You're actually encountering these words in a bunch of different ways, and that is teaching your brain that these words that you haven't encountered before or ever needed in your life are actually suddenly important, because we're encountering them through a bunch of different mediums. We're looking at them, we're listening at them, etc. And because we're using many different parts of our brain, this actually does help with learning stuff. The second thing you need to understand is immersion. And no, I'm not talking about travel to the country and never speak English again or that kind of silly stuff. I basically just mean, when you're learning a foreign language, it helps to try and put things into the foreign language that you wouldn't normally do. So if you have a calendar, for example, I would show you mine, but it's covered in stuff right now, so probably not the best idea. But you can basically write things out in your calendar in a foreign language. You can change things, like if you're learning Arabic or something that doesn't use like the numerals that are most commonly used. Are they Hindu Arabic numerals? No, that's not right. I'm not actually 100% sure. But the numbers that we use in English, if you can actually change your phone to display the digits in another language, or you can change the day on your phone. Like, it could be, instead of Monday, it could be lunedì if you're learning Italian. For example, it could be a bunch of different things. You can put your habit tracker and your goals into a foreign language. Just try and do little things like that to actually surround yourself with the language you're learning more often. And the third thing I will say, which is extremely important, is consistency. If you're doing repetition for a few days or a week, and then you never touch those words ever again, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to pull them actively from your brain when you need to speak the language. So consistency is super important. You should be doing stuff multiple times a week. Ideally, on a daily basis, you're doing something in the language. So what you need to understand is basically, forget memorizing content, forget trying to remember words. What you're actually doing is teaching your brain information is crucial. That is how you remember things in your long-term memory. And if you're able to do that using these steps I've outlined above, you will learn a language quicker. Like, this video isn't full of like learn a language in 24 hours rubbish. This is actually things you can do, that I do, and that allow me to learn a language faster. And as a bonus tip for this section, I will say, do something fun every day in the language you're learning. That helps. So if you could do a crossword, if you could draw a labeled picture of something, like I drew a picture of the human body in Russian and labeled every part of it. Just little things like that can actually help with you basically making progress in the language and it not being so difficult. The fourth thing that we're going to talk about is acquiring more and more over time. And this is something people don't really talk about because they're more focused on how to learn things as fast as possible. But what actually can happen is people get very complacent, and because they have made some progress in the language they're learning, they actually stop putting effort in and actually trying to learn more stuff. And I've already given the uncut gems analogy, but what I want you to understand is that the journey isn't finished until it's finished. So if you want to be fluent, if you want to be broken conversational, whatever it is, don't just stop learning words because you've learned some. You actually need to keep exposing yourself to words you don't understand. So if you can read a text and it's easy, great. That's kind of fun. It's okay to smell the roses and to enjoy reading things that you do understand everything. But what I want you to understand is you need to keep exposing yourself to things that are unfamiliar so that you can continue to learn and continue to encounter uncut gems. And a word that we use for this is progressive overload. So if you are, into the gym like I am, progressive overload, as you'll know, is you have to increase the weights over time. Otherwise, you won't get any stronger. So if you start off with 10 kilo dumbbells in an exercise and you get stronger, you need to push it to 12 and then to 14 so that you don't just keep doing the same thing. Otherwise, you'll stop gaining muscle. I don't know what exercise this is, but that, lifting weights, right? And it's the same with anything. It's the same with language learning. So what you need to do when you're learning a language is to make sure that you're continually exposing yourself to those uncut gems so that you can keep acquiring skills within the language. Don't, like, if you to put this into a video game analogy, don't delete your account before you've maxed out your stats. You actually need to keep putting effort in, keep grinding, keep it fun, keep it competitive. And over time, you will actually get better. And as a bonus tip, I would say date your work. So if you use a notebook, which you definitely should be like me, if you don't have a notebook, I'm going to find you and kill you. So yeah, YouTube's going to strike the video because I said that. That's how serious I am. I know where you live. I will find you. But you should date your work, and not like that, you idiot. Like this. Put a date in the top corner. Didn't say match your work on Tinder. Fucking idiots. I meant, so just do that. Put a date in the corner of the page so that you can look back over time and see at what time you did that stuff, and you can go back and it's really wholesome. You can see the mistakes you made and how much you've grown since then, and it's just really good. And I think a really good feeling is looking back at your past self and seeing all the effort your past self put in that your future self gets to enjoy, because it's your future self that you're actually doing this stuff for. Your future self is going to be good at the foreign language when you're not currently. So my final bonus tip that I started to give you is identity. So when you're someone who's trying to learn a language, it can be done, but it's more difficult because it's kind of like you're at point A, point B is you're learning the language and you're trying to stretch a rubber band from point A around point B. And inevitably you're going to sometimes, as we discussed with the short-term motivation, you're going to not feel like doing it and the rubber band's going to snap back. And it's just, you have the wrong kind of frame going into it. So what I want you to understand is that you're not someone who's trying to learn a language. You're someone who is learning the language. You're someone who speaks the language. You're just in the trenches right now. It's just difficult. You are a speaker of the language. You don't go around telling people this because, they're going to assume, oh, you don't speak the language because you can't answer these questions or whatever. But just within your own head, understand you're a speaker of Japanese. You're a speaker of Russian. You're a speaker of Italian or whatever language you're learning. You're just in the trenches right now. It's difficult, but the peacetime will come when you can speak the language from all the hard work you put in. And if you are truly interested in that, I'd highly, highly recommend you check out the Language Learning Accelerator. I've got it linked in the description. Have a look at it. It's a very small amount of money, but it will save you months and months of time in language learning because I've explained everything you could possibly need to actually make progress in a language to at least an intermediate level for beginners. But guys, if you do like the channel, definitely hit the subscribe button. It does make me feel better about all the effort I put in for free. I've got a link to the Discord in the description, other videos as well to help you kind of go from here and continue on your language learning journey. And yeah, thank you for watching and have a good one.